The photograph shouldn't exist. I'm holding it right now, and I still can't quite believe what I'm looking at. It's dated March 1910 on the back in faded pencil, and it shows 23 people standing outside a one-room schoolhouse in Pineville, Kentucky. 22 of them are smiling. The twee. In T3rd is a little girl, maybe 8 years old, standing apart from the others. Her eyes are completely white, not closed. White. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I'm a folklorist specializing in Appalachian oral histories. I found this photograph 3 months ago in a water-damaged box in the Bae cement of the Bell County Historical Society. The box was labeled "Not Catalog" in handwriting from the 1950s. Inside were letters, medical records, newspaper clippings, and testimonies that had been deliberately hidden for over a century. What I uncovered wasn't just a forgotten piece of local history. It was evidence of something that powerful people worked very hard to bury. And the more I dug, the more I realized why they wanted it to stay buried. This is the story of Callaway Creek, a mining community that doesn't appear on any modern maps. This is the story of a little girl named S.C. Stamper who could do something that terrified everyone around her. And this is the story of what happened when greed, fear, and desperation collided in the mountains of eastern Kentucky in 1910. I need to tell you this story because the people who lived it deserve to be remembered. But I also need to tell you because what happened in Callaway Creek tells us something important about how easily truth can be erased when it's inconvenient for the right people. Let me start with what I know for certain. Asterisk, the girl who saw S.C. Stamper was born in January 1902 during the worst blizzard Neon and Bell County could remember. Her mother, Ruth, nearly died in childbirth. The midwife who attended the delivery, a woman named Granny Couch, told people afterward that the baby came out not breathing, blue as creek ice. Granny worked on her for nearly 10 minutes before Essie finally drew Biari, and screamed. But Granny Couch said something else too, something she'd later try to take back. She said that when Essie's eyes first opened, they were solid white, like milk glass. No pupils, no iris, just white. Then she blinked, and they were normal brown like her mother's. Granny Couch as known for her honesty, not her imagination. She was the kind of practical mountain woman who delivered half the babies in 3 counties and never told a tall tale in her life. So when she mentioned the white eyes to Ruth's sister, people took notice. But Granny asked her not to repeat it, said she must have been tired, seeing things in the lamplight. The first few years of Essie's life seemed normal enough. She learned to walk and talk at the usual times. She was quiet, which was common for mountain children, taught early not to waste words. Her father, Thomas Stamper, worked in the coal mine owned by the Ashland Coal Company. They lived in a company house, rough-hewn lumber, 3 rooms, newspaper, stuffed in the cracks to keep out the wind. It wasn't until Essie was 4 that people started to notice something was different. She'd stand in the middle of the room and talk to empty air. Every child has imaginary friends, but Essie's conversations were different. She'd pause like she was listening, then respond with specific information she shouldn't have known. One day, she told her mother that the man with the burned hands said there was money hidden in the tobacco tin under the loose floorboard. Ruth dismissed it until she remembered that her father, who died in a house fire 3 years before Essie was born, had burned his hands badly as a young man, and he had hidden money in tobacco tins. Ruth checked under the loose floorboard in her mother's old cabin and found $43 in a tin. She never told anyone. Mountain people understood that some things were better left unspoken, but Essie kept talking to people no one else could see. Asterisk the mine disaster. Everything changed on November 12, 1906. Essie was 4 years old. That morning, she didn't let her father leave for work. She clung to his legs, crying harder than Ruth had ever seen. "The mountain's gonna fall," Essie kept saying. "The mountain's gonna fall and the dark water's gonna come." Thomas Stamper tried to calm her, but she was hysterical. She pointed at the door and Scray. "Med, they're all standing there. They're all wet and they're telling you not to go. Papa, please don't go." Ruth saw her husband's face go pale. "Who's there, baby?" he asked. "All the men from the mine," Essie said, tears streaming down her face. "They're all wet and black and they're saying the mountain's gonna fall today." Thomas Stamper didn't go to work that morning. He told the foreman he was sick, which cost him a day's pay they couldn't afford to lose. But he stayed home. At 2:47 that afternoon, a section of the Callaway Creek mine collapsed. An underground stream they didn't know was there burst through the tunnel wall. 23 men drowned in the dark, trapped by fallen timber and rising water. It took 3 days to recover all the bodies. Thomas Stamper should have been on that shift. Everyone knew it. And everyone knew it. And everyone knew why he'd stayed home. After that, people look at Essie Stamper differently. Some crossed themselves when she walked by. Some mothers pulled their children close and hurried past the Stamper house. But some people started showing up at the door with questions. "Can you ask my boy where he hid his savings? Will you tell my husband I'm sorry for what I said before he passed? Can you find out what happened to my sister who went missing?" Ruth turned them all away. She knew what happened to people who were different in these mountains. She knew about the water witches who got run out of town for working on the Sabbath. She knew about the herb woman who'd been accused of cursing a judge's daughter when the girl got sick after refusing the woman's remedy. She knew about the boy born with a caul over his face who could predict whether they'd found him dead in the woods, officially called it an accident. Being useful to people was dangerous. Being strange was worse. Being both could get you killed. But word spread anyway, the way it always does in small communities. By the time Essie was 6, everyone in Callaway Creek knew about Ruth Stamper's girl who could talk to the dead. Most people just avoided them, but some saw an opportunity. The company man. Ants 1908. The Ashland Coal Company sent a new mine supervisor to Callaway Creek. His name was Curtis Brennan, and he was different from the previous bosses. He'd been educated back east, wore tailored suits even into the mine office, and talked about efficiency, and productivity, like they were virtues that outweighed everything else. Brennan increased the daily quotas. He cut safety inspections in half to save money. He threatened to fire anyone who complained and brought in replacement workers from 3 counties over who were desperate enough to work under any conditions. Within 6 months, 3 more men had died in accidents that the company blamed on worker carelessness. The mine at Callaway Creek was the deepest in the region, carved into a mountain that the Cherokee who'd lived there first had considered sacred ground. They'd called it Death, Mountain that remembers in their language. They'd avoided mining or building on it. When the coal company came in the 1890s, an old Cherokee man had warned them that the mountain held the dead, that disturbing it would bring trouble. They'd laughed at him. Coal meant money, and money meant power. That's always how it goes. By 1909, the Ashland Coal Company was pushing deeper into the mountain than ever before. They'd opened 2 new shafts and were pulling out high-quality bituminous coal that fetched premium prices in the cities up north. Curtis Brennan got a bonus for exceeding productio. End targets. The miners got longer hours and lower pay. That's when Brennan heard about Essie Stamper. He didn't believe in ghosts or second sight or any of that mountain superstition, as he called it. But he was a practical man, and he recognized a tool when he saw one. If the miners believed the girl could talk to the dead, that belief could be useful. In March 1910, Brennan showed up at the Stamper house with an offer. "I'll pay you $20, he told Ruth, "to bring your daughter to the mine office once a week. Let her talk to these spirits or whatever it is she does. Tell the mean and what their dead friends and family have to say. Give them comfort. Ruth said no immediately, but $20 was more than Thomas made in 2 weeks of dangerous work underground. $20 meant food through the winter, medicine when someone got sick, maybe even enough to think about leaving Callaway Creek entirely. Once a week, Brennan said. 1 hour? That's all. And I'll make sure your husband gets the safer surface work. He won't have to go underground anymore. Thomas had been coughing blood for 2 months. The mine dust was killing him slowly, the way it killed all the inners eventually. The chance to work above ground might add years to his life. Ruth looked at Essie, who was sitting at the table pretending to do schoolwork but clearly listening. The girl met her mother's eyes and gave a small nod. All right, Ruth said. But if anything bad happens, if anyone ease to hurt her or use her wrong, we're done. You understand me? Brennan smiled. Of course. I just want to help these men find peace with their losses. That's all. He was lying, of course, but they didn't know that yet. The sessions. The first session was held on March 15, 1910, in the Min.E. office. Brennan had invited 6 miners who'd lost family members in various accidents over the years. He'd made it optional, even given them time off work to attend, which was unheard of. He wanted them to feel like this was a gift, not a manipulation. Essie sat in a chair that was too big for her feet dangling above the floor. She was 8 years old and terrified, though she tried not to show it. Ruth stood beside her, one hand on her daughter's shoulder. The first man was called Jacob Pierce. His brother had died in a roof collapse 2 years earlier. Jacob was a big man, hard from years of physical labor, but his hands shook when he sat down across from Essie. What do you want to know? Essie asked quietly. Is my brother... Is he here? Jacob's voice cracked. Essie was quiet for a moment. Then her eyes went distant, unfocused. He says he doesn't blame you. He says you couldn't have known the timber was bad. Jacob started crying, big, silent tears running down his coal-stained face. I was supposed to check it. I was the senior man on that shift. I should have checked. He says you did check. He says the timber looked solid. It wasn't your fault. Went on for 20 minutes. Essie relaying messages, Jacob asking questions, crying, laughing, remembering. When it was over, he shook her hand like she was an adult and thanked her with such raw emotion that everyone in the room felt it. The other 5 sessions went similarly. Men crying, find enclosure, hearing things that gave them peace. One man's dead wife told him where she'd hidden their wedding rings before she died of fever. Another man's son told him the fishing hole where they'd spent their best day together. Specific details, personal memories, things Essie couldn't possibly have known. Brennan watched it all with satisfaction. Not because he cared about these men's peace. He'd already made that calculation and found their emotional well-being irrelevant to quarterly profit margins. No, he was satisfied because he saw how it changed them. Saw them straighten up, smile, talk about hope and fate and God's plan. Saw them stop complaining about the quotas and the danger and the pay cuts. Grief makes people angry. Angry workers form unions, demand changes, cause problems. But these workers weren't angry anymore. They were comforted. They'd heard from their dead loved ones, and those loved ones had told them everything was all right. Perfect. The expansion asker. Over the next month, the sessions continued every week. More miners came. Some brought questions about money and inheritance, which Essie answered with disturbing accuracy. One man found his father's life savings hidden in a chimney based on what Essie told him. Another discovered that his supposedly faithful wife had been unfaithful. His dead brother told Essie details that the man confirmed through confronting his wife later. The sessions became the talk of Callaway Creek. People came from neighboring communities to attend. Brennan started charging admission 50 cents a session, which people paid gladly. He kept 40 cents and gave Ruth 10, which she accepted with growing unease. The money was good, but something felt wrong about it. Essie was changing too. She was quieter than ever, withdrawn. She had nightmares and would wake up screaming about too many voices and they won't leave me alone. Dark circles appeared under her eyes. She stopped eating much. Ruth noticed that sometimes Essie's eyes would go unfocused and vacant, and she'd speak in voices that weren't her own, old Ice's, young voices, angry voices. Maybe we should stop, Ruth told Thomas one night. We can't, he said, and he sounded defeated. I tried to quit last week. Brennan said if we back out of our agreement, he'll fire me and make sure no mine in 3 counties will hire me. We'll have nothing. Will starve. Better to starve then what? She's helping people, Ruth. You've seen it. Those men need what she gives them. At what cost? Look at her. She's wasting away. Thomas didn't have an answer for that. He just coughed into his handkerchief and looked away. The cloth came back spot. Ted with blood. Meanwhile, Curtis Brennan had bigger plans. In April 1910, he called Essie in for a private session. Ruth insisted on being there, and Brennan agreed with his usual oily charm. I need to ask the dead about the mine, he said. About where to dig next, where the richest coal seams are, where it's safe. Ruth immediately objected. She talks to people who passed. She can't predict the future or tell you where to find coal. Can't she ask the dead miners where they thought the best coal was? Can't she ask them where the mountain is weak, where it's strong? Surely the D know these things. Essie spoke before Ruth could respond. They do know, and they're angry. Brennan's smile faltered. Angry? The mountain is angry. The dead are angry. You're taking too much. You're going too deep. They say you need to stop. Who says this? All of them. All the miners who died here, and the ones who were here before. The ones who lived here long, long ago. They say this mountain is sacred ground and you're violating it. They say if you keep digging deeper, something bad will happen. Brennan laughed. Actually laughed. Well, you tell them that I appreciate our concern, but the Ashland Coal Company has invested too much to stop now. We have contracts to fulfill, shareholders to satisfy. The mining will continue. Essie's eyes went white. Not the unfocused, distant look she got during sessions. Completely white. No pupils, no iris. Just white, like they were in that photograph I found, Ruth screamed. Even Brennan stumbled backward, his confidence cracking. When Essie spoke, it wasn't her voice. It was multiple voices layered over each other. Men, women, children, speaking in unison. The mountain remembers. The mountain keeps. You will dig today, up, and you will release what should stay buried. Stop now or face what comes. Then she collapsed. Her eyes rolled back to normal as she fell forward, and Ruth caught her before she hit the floor. Brennan stood there, pale and shaken. For the first time, he looked uncertain. But not uncertain. Eno. Ugh. To stop. Asterisk. The discovery. In May 1910, the miners in the deepest shaft hit something unexpected. It wasn't coal. It wasn't rock. It was a hollow space, a natural cave system that ran through the heart of the mountain. When they broke through, stale air rushed out, air that hadn't been breathed in thousands of years. And with it came a smell that the miners couldn't quite describe. Some said it smelled like rot. Others said it smelled like nothing at all, which was somehow worse. The company geologist went down to investigate. His name was Dr. Henry Whitmore, and he'd studied at Cornell. He was a scientist, not prone to superstition. But when he came back up from that cave, he looked like he'd seen something that broke his understanding of the world. He went straight to Brennan and said they needed to seal that section immediately. Close it off, fill it with concrete, pretend you'd never found it. Brennan asked why. Dr. Whitmore said there were markings on the cave walls, very old markings, older than the Cherokee, older than any Native American culture he knew of, symbols and pictograms that showed stick figures being dragged into the ground, consumed by something that rose from below, and in the deepest chamber there were bones, hundreds of bones, maybe thousands, arranged in patterns that weren't natural. It's a burial site, Whitmore said. Or I don't know what to call it. A containment site. Whatever people were here before, they put something in there, and they meant for it to stay. We need to leave it alone. Brennan asked if there was coal beyond the cave system. Whitmore admitted there probably was. The geological survey suggested a massive seam just past the cave network, potentially the richest deposit in the entire region. Then we keep digging, Brennan said. Clear the cave, shore up the walls, and push through to the seam on the other side. Didn't you hear what I said? This is a sacred site, a burial ground, maybe more than that. We have no idea what. I heard you, Doctor. I heard superstition and old bones. I need coal and oat ghost stories. The cave gets cleared and we continue mining. Dr. Whitmore quit that same day. He left Callaway Creek and never came back. Years later, according to letters I found, he told his family he'd seen something in that cave that convinced him some places should never be disturbed. He wouldn't say what, but before he left, he went to see Essie Stamper. Asterisk the warning, Dr. Whitmore showed up at the Stamper house on May 20th, 1910. Ruth almost didn't let him in. She was deeply suspicious of anyone associated with the mine company by then. But he said he'd quit, and his face was so earnest and frightened that she relented. He sat down with Essie at their rough wooden table. "You been down in the mine?" he asked. She shook her head. "Never. Mama won't let me." "But you know what's down there. The spirits talk to you about it." "Yes." "What do they say about the cave we have and the one deep in the mountain?" Essie was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "They say it's a door that should stay closed." "A door to where?" "Not to where. To when. To before. To the time when the world was different and there were things that aren't here anymore. Things that stayed in, the dark places where people couldn't go, and the people who were here first knew about them and built that place to keep them in." Dr. Whitmore's hands were shaking. "What happens if we open it fully? If we dig past it? The door opens both ways. What's kept in can out. And what's out?" She looked up at him with those brown eyes that sometimes went white. "What's out can be taken in." "Can you be more specific?" "They're trying to be. But it's hard. The dead who speak to me, they don't know everything. They only know what they knew in life, and what they've seen from where they but all of them are afraid, every single one. The miners who died, the people who lived here before, all of them say the same thing. Don't dig deeper. Don't open the door all the way." Dr. Whitmore thanked her and left. He tried one more time to convince Brennan to stop the excavation. When they failed, he wrote letters to the State Mining Board, to the governor's office, to anyone he thought might listen. No one did. The Ashland Coal Company had powerful friends and deep pockets. One geologist's concerns about old bones and cave paintings weren't going to stop them from accessing what Strapping. It be the richest coal deposit in Kentucky. On June 1, 1910, a crew of 12 men went into the cave with dynamite and timber. Their job was to clear a path through to the coal seam on the other side. They didn't come back. Asterisk the disappearance. When the crew didn't return after their shift, dead, the mine foreman sent another group down to find them. This second group made it to the cave entrance and found the equipment, lanterns, tools, dynamite, but no men. The timber they'd set up to shore the cave walls was in place. The work area showed signs that they'd been there, but the men elves were gone. The second crew searched for 3 hours before returning to the surface. They reported hearing strange sounds in the deeper parts of the cave nut. Footsteps or voices, but something else. A scraping sound. Movement that echoed wrong, like it was coming from multiple directions at Tris. Brennan organized a larger search party. 20 men went down with extra lanterns and ropes. They were instructed to search thoroughly, but also to mark their way carefully and stay together. No one was to go into the deeper chambers alone. They found 2 of the missing miners, both real alive but catatonic, sitting against the cave wall with their eyes open, staring at nothing. Neither would speak. When the search party tried to move them, they screamed, horrible, primal screams that echoed through the caves and made even the bravest men want to run. Eventually, they had to car. Why, the 2 miners out by force. Both were taken to Dr. Morrison, the company doctor in Pineville. His report, which I found in the hidden box, described them as suffering from severe shock and nervous collapse. Their pupils were fully dilated and didn't respond to light. Their hands were bloody rum clawing at the cave walls, fingernails torn off, and both of them had the same strange marking on their foreheads, a symbol that wasn't paint or tattoo, but seemed to be burned into the skin. A symbol that matched the pictograms Dr. Whitmore had seen on the cave walls. The other 10 miners were ever found. The families demanded answers. The mine workers' union, such as it was, threatened to strike. The sheriff came out from Pineville to investigate. There was talk of bringing in the state police, maybe even federal mine inspectors. Curtis Brennan knew he had a problem. 10 missing miners meant investigations, lawsuits, potential criminal charges. The company could weather it, but his career couldn't. He needed to control the narrative, needed to give people an explanation that would satisfy them enough to prevent further scrutiny. That's when he decided to use Essie one more time. The seance, On June 10, 1910, Brennan announced that he was organizing a special session with Essie Stamper. He invited the families of the missing miners, prominent community members, the sheriff, and even a reporter from the Middlesbrough Daily News. He said the purpose was to contact the Spira, it's of the missing men, to find out what happened to them. Ruth refused immediately. Absolutely not. No, you've done enough damage. Leave us alone. Brennan offered $100. When Ruth still refused, he offered $200, then $300. That was more money than Thomas would make in a year of work, even if he lived long enough to work a full year, which his deteriorating lungs made increasingly unlikely. But Ruth still said no. That's when Brennan showed his true nature. He told Ruth that the company lawyers had been looking into the Stampers' situation. Turned out, Thomas owed the company store nearly $60 debts accumulated over years of buying on credit when times were tight. The company could call that debt due immediately. They could evict the Stampers from their company house. They could garnish Thomas's wages. They could make life very, very difficult. Or, Brennan said with his snake oil smile, you can help me with this one thing. One session. Then we're square. I'll even forgive the debt at the company store. You'll own your house, free and clear. Ruth knew a threat when she heard one. More than that, she knew that refusing powerful people in these mountains had consequences. The coal companies owned everything, the houses, the stores, the jobs, even the law. Cross them, and you'd find yourself with nothing, cast out with nowhere to go. So she agreed, with conditions. The session would happen at her house, not the mine. It would last no more than an hour, and if at any point Essie showed signs of distress, they would stop immediately. Brennan agreed to everything. He didn't care about the conditions. He just needed the session to happen, needed it to be public and witnessed so that whatever story emerged from it would have credibility. The session was held on the evening of June 12, 1910. More than 40 people crowded into and around the Stamper house. The families of the missing miners, other mine workers, the sheriff, the reporter, Curtis Brennan and several other company men, and Essie, sitting in that same too big Keechaw air, looking small and frightened but also resigned. She knew what was expected of her. She'd become a tool, a thing to be used by people with power. 8 years old and already understanding that the world was cruel to people like her. The session started with the usual questions. Are the spirits here? Can you feel them? Essie nodded. They're always here now. There are so many of them. Can you speak to the miners who went missing? The 12 men who went into the cave? I can try. She closed her eyes. The room went very quiet. Even the sounds from outside seemed to fade. No bird caw, LLs, no wind in the trees, nothing, just an oppressive silence that made everyone uncomfortable. Then Essie spoke in a voice that wasn't hers. Cold. It's so cold here. Dark. Can't see anything. Who is this? Brennan asked. Which of the men? All of us. We're all here. We're all in the dark. Where are you? We searched the cave. You weren't there. Not in the cave. Through it. Past it. Down. We went down so far. Followed the light. We thought it was lamplight from someone who'd gone ahead, but it wasn't. It wasn't light at all. One of the wives started crying. Please. What happened to you? The door opened. We opened the door and it saw us, and it was so hungry. So hungry for so long. Alone in the dark for thousands of years, and then we came and opened the door and let the light in, and it came toward the light, and it came toward the light, and it took us, pulled us down. We're still going to. Went on, we're always going down. It's eating us slowly, taking us apart piece by piece in the dark, and we can't die because it won't let us die. It keeps us alive so it can keep eating. The room erupted. People screaming, crying, some trying to leave but unable to because of the crowd. The sheriff was shouting for order. Brennan looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. This wasn't the neat explanation he'd wanted. But Essie wasn't done. Her eyes snapped open, and they were white, completely white. And when she spoke, it was with a voice that made everyone freeze, a voice that resonated nigh, like it came from somewhere cavernous and ancient. You opened the door. You were warned. You were warned. You worked the door, and now it is free. It rises. It hungers. It congers. It calms. She stood up, moving in ways that weren't natural, her joints bending slightly wrong. It calms. She stood up, moving in ways that weren't natural, her joints bending slightly wrong. It calms for all of you, for this place, for on this mountain. The door is open and it will not close until it has fed enough to es it is fed, though to es it is fui eons of hunger. Then she started convulsing. Blood ran from her nose, her eyes. Ruth screamed and grabbed her daughter. The crowd panicked, pushing toward the doors, trampling each other to get out. In the house, the oil lamp got knocked over. Fire spread fast in the dry wooden house. People were screaming, running, burning. Thomas dragged Ruth and Essie out through window. The reporter from the Middlesboro paper got out. So did the sheriff and about half the people who'd been inside. The other died in the fire, including Curtis Brennan. The cover-up, the official story, printed in the Middlesboro Daily News on June 15, 1910, was brief and sanitized. Fire at local residence claims 17 lives. The article described a tragic accident during a community gathering. An oil lamp had been knocked over in the crowded room. The fire spread quickly. Many perished. The reporter who'd been there wrote a sympathetic piece about the dangers of overcrowded housing and the need for better fire safety in mountain communities. He didn't mention Essie Stamper. He didn't mention the niece. He didn't mention anything she'd said, because the Ashland Coal Company made sure he didn't. I found the original draft of his article in that water-damaged box. The real story, the one that was never published. It described everything, Essie's warnings, her possession, her prophecy. It named Curtis Brennan and the company's negligence. It connected the fire to the disappearances and the cave discovery. That reporter's name was James Mackenzie. 3 days after the fire, he received a visit from company lawyers who explained that printing certain stories could be considered libel. They how'd him documentation proving that the stampers were frauds who'd been running a con, taking money from grieving families. They had affidavits from witnesses who claimed the fire started when Thomas Stamper knocked over the lamp while drunk. They also showed him a contract buying out the newspaper he worked for. His boss would be replaced. If he wanted to keep his job, he'd print the story they approved. James Mackenzie printed their story, but he kept his original draft, kept all his notes, kept everything in a box that he gave to a sister before he left town. She donated it to the Bell County Historical Society in 1954 with instructions not to open it for 50 years. I opened it 46 years late. The cover-up went deeper than just the newspaper. The Ashland Coal Company moved fast to control the narrative. They paid off the families of those who died in the fire generous settlements with strict non-disclosure agreements. Anyone who refused found themselves unable to get work in any company mine. Since the company owned nearly every mine in the region, that meant destitution. They brought in new workers from out of state who didn't know the history. They officially closed the deep shaft where the cave had been discovered, filling it with concrete and posting signs about structural instability. The cave itself was sealed with dynamite, collapsing the entrance and any passages beyond. The missing miners were declared dead, killed in a cave collapse. Their family, he's got modest death benefits. End of story. Except it wasn't the end. Asterisk what happened next, asterisk after the fire, the Stamper family disappeared. There's no record of them in Callaway Creek after June 1910. No death certificates, no property sales, nothing. They just vanished. I spent weeks trying to trace them. Finally, I found a mention in the records of a Baptist church in Hazard, Kentucky, about 60 miles away. A family matching their description had shown up in late June 1910. They'd given a different last name, Carter, instead of Stamper, but the description matched. A man with severe lung disease, his wife, and a young daughter who was peculiar and troubled. The man died in October 1910, pneumonia complicated by black lung disease. His wife and daughter stayed in Hazard for another year. Then there's no more record of them. Like they dissolved into the mountains, became part of the oral tradition of strange things that happen in Appalachia. But I did find one more thing. In 1943, a woman named Essie Carter was admitted to Eastern State Hospital, the psychiatric facility in Lexington. She was 41 years old, roughly the right age. Her admission papers said she'd be and found wandering the streets, speaking in tongues, claiming she could see the dead. She spent the rest of her life there, died in 1967. The hospital records describe her as chronically disturbed and experiencing persistent hallucinations. She told the doctors that she'd been cursed as a child, that the dead wouldn't leave her alone, that something had touched her when she was young and she'd never been able to shake it free. She talked about a mountain that remembered, a door that should have stayed closed, things that lived in the dark before people existed and would still be there ere people were gone. The doctors diagnosed her with schizophrenia and gave her electroshock therapy, because that's what we do to people who say things we don't want to hear. We call them crazy and we lock them away. Asterisk Callaway Creek today. Here's the thing that made me sure this story was real. That it wasn't just mountain folklore or mass hysteria or a tragedy that got exaggerated over the years. Callaway Creek doesn't exist anymore. The company shut down the mine in 1913, citing declining coal quality. They pulled out completely, taking their equipment and infrastructure. The workers catered to other mining towns. Within a decade, the forest had reclaimed most of the settlement. Today, If you try to find Callaway Creek on a map, you won't. It's not on state maps, not on county maps, not on any official records. The area where it stood is marked as part of the Daniel Boone Natty, Ono Forest, public land, protected. But if you go there, and I have, you'll find remnants. Old foundations overgrown with kudzu, rusted equipment half buried in the dirt, and concrete. Lots of concrete. Way more than you'd expect for a small mining operation. The area where the mine was located is completely sealed under tons of poured concrete, not filled in, not collapsed naturally, deliberately entombed. I had a geologist look at photos I took, and he confirmed that kind of work would have cost a fortune and required heavy equipment. It was done after the mine closed, probably in the 1920s or 30s. Someone spent a lot of money to make absolutely certain nothing could get out of that mountain, or that no one could get back in. There's more. The Cherokee name for that mountain, which I found in historical records, translates roughly to where the old ones sleep, not where they're I'd where they sleep. The distinction is important. The dead are buried. The sleeping might wake. And there are stories from the 1920s and 30s, scattered references in newspapers from Pineville and Middlesboro, about strange sounds coming from the old Callaway Creek area. Scraping sounds underground. Lights seen at night where no lights should be. Animals avoiding the entire region. One report from 1928 describes a group of hunters who went into the area and never came back. Their dogs returned alone, wild-eyed and traumatized, refusing to go anywhere near those woods again. The search party found the hunters' equipment arranged in a circle around one of the old mine entrances, but no sign of the men themselves. The official explanation was that they'd fallen into an old shaft and their bodies couldn't be recovered. The Forest Service then put up warning signs and made the entire area officially off-limits. It still is. You can't legally go there. It's marked as a hazardous former mining site, unstable ground, extreme danger. There are actual fences and regular patrols. For a place that's been abandoned for over 100 years, they sure are careful about keeping people away. I ask what I think really happened. I'm a folklorist, not a psychic. I don't claim to know if Essie Stamper really could speak to the dead. I can't tell you if there's actually something ancient and hungry sleeping under that mountain. I can't prove that the disappearances and the fire and the strange events that followed were caused by anything supernatural. But I can tell you what the evidence shows. The evidence shows that a little girl in 1910 knew things she shouldn't have been able to know. Multiple witnesses confirmed this. People who were hard-headed mountain folk, not prone to flight, of fancy, swore that she could relay specific, accurate information from the dead. The evidence shows that she warned about the mine disaster and was right. She warned about the cave and what would happen if they kept digging. She warned that something would be released. And then 12 men disappeared in that cave. 2 were found catatonic with burns on their foreheads matching ancient symbols, and a bunch of other people died in a fire that started during a supernatural event. The evidence shows that a major corporation went to extraordinary lengths to cover up what happened. They led the press, paid off witnesses, sealed the mine with enough concrete to entomb a city block, and erased an entire settlement from the maps. The evidence shows that the area is still restricted and patrolled more than a century later, despite there being no apparent reason for such vigilance. You don't do all that for a simple mining accident. You don't spend that kind of money and effort unless you're really, really scared of something. Asterisk the bigger picture. This story isn't just about one girl or one mine or one tragedy. It's about a pattern that repeats throughout history. Indigeno, as people warn against disturbing sacred sites, and we ignore them because we want what's under the ground. People with unusual abilities tell us things we don't want to hear, so we discredit them, institutionalize them, erase them from the record. And when something goes wrong, when people die or disappear, or when things happen that don't fit our rational worldview, we cover it up. We create alternative explanations. We make the uncomfortable truth go away so it doesn't interfere with profit margins and development plans and the forward march of industrial progress. The Appalachian Mountains, full of stories like this. Not just folklore and tall tales, but real events that got classified as folklore because that was easier than confronting them. The woman in Tennessee who predicted World War I by reading patterns in spider webs. The boy in West Virginia who survived being buried alive for 3 days and came back changed, speaking Latin he never learned. The entire town in North Carolina that disappeared overnight in 1887, leaving only their clothes behind. These stories get dismissed as superstition or legend, but I've seen the documents. I've read the accounts from credible witnesses. I've visited the places where these things happened and found evidence that someone went to great lengths to erase them from history. Essie Stamper's story is one of thousands. She was just the one whose evidence survived in a water-damaged box in a basement waiting for someone to find it and refuse to let it stay buried. What it means, I've thought a lot about why this story bothers me so much. It's not just the injustice of what happened to Essie and her family, though that's part of it. It's not just the corporate malfeasance and cover-up, though that's infuriating. The question at the heart of it all, what if she was right? What if Essie Stamper really could communicate with the dead? And what if the dead were trying to warn us about something real? What if there are places in this world that we shouldn't disturb, doors that should stay closed, things that would remain buried? Our modern worldview doesn't leave room for that possibility. We assume that everything can be explained, everything can be consplained, everything can be exploited for profit. We assume that indigenous warnings are just primitive superstition, that unusual abilities are mental illness, that anything we don't understand is either fake or just not yet explained by science. But what if we're wrong? What if the people who've lived close to the land for generations, who've maintained oral traditions about places to avoid and things to respect, actually know something we don't? What if the children who see things we can't see aren't crazy or making it up? What if we've been sealing and covering and forgetting things that we really shouldn't forget? I'm not saying I believe in ghosts or ancient evil or psychic children. I'm saying I believe in ghosts or ancient evil or psychic children. Why disbelief? I'm saying the arrogance of assuming we know everything, that traditional knowledge is worthless, that profit matters more than precaution. That arrogance has consequences. Callaway Creek is one consequence. Sealed under concrete, guarded and restricted, its very existence erased from fish memory. But the mountain is still there. The concrete is cracking, and the Forest Service still patrols that area like they're protecting something, or keeping something in. Essie's legacy. Keep coming back to that photograph I found. 23 people standing outside a schoolhouse. In March 1910, 22 smiling. One little girl with white eyes standing apart. I've shown this photo to experts, ophthalmologists, photographers, photo analysts. None of them can explain the white eyes. It's not a development error, not a trick of light, not cataracts or any known eye conduct. It's just white, like someone painted over her pupils and irises with white paint, but it's clearly her actual eyes. The photo was taken 3 months before the disaster. 3 months before the fire. The photographer's notes, which survived in the same box, mentioned that when he looked rough the viewfinder, the girl's eyes were normal. It was only when the photo was developed that he saw the white. He wrote that he showed the photo to the girl's mother, who became very upset and demanded he destroy it. He kept it anyway, disturbed by it. He kept it anyway, disturbed by it, feeling like it meant something he couldn't quite grasp. He included it in the box that eventually made its way to the Historical Society with a note: the girl who saw too much. Essie Stamper saw too much. She knew too much. She warned people, and they used her instead of listening to her. An 8-year-old girl trying to tell adults that they were making a terrible mistake, and the adults cared more about coal profits than her warnings. She spent the rest of her life in an institution, tormented by voices and visions, treated like she was defective. She died alone in 1967, and her death certificate lists no known relatives. Just another forgotten person warehoused by a system that didn't know what to do with her. But she wasn't crazy. The evidence supports that she had some kind of genuine ability, and the evidence supports that what she warned about was real. That matters. It should matter to all of us. Asterisk, the warning W. He didn't heed. Ask. In 1910, a child in Appalachia spoke to the dead and told us to stop digging. We didn't listen. We dug anyway. We found something we shouldn't have found. We lost people we couldn't afford to lose, and then we buried the whole story so deep we thought it would never surface. But stories don't stay buried any more than whatever is under that mountain stays contained forever. Truth has a way of working itself free, given enough time. I'm telling you this story now because I think we need to remember it. We need to remember what happens when we prioritize profit over wisdom. And we dismiss warnings because they come from the marginalized and powerless, when we assume our technology and arrogance make us masters of everything we encounter. The mountains remember. That's what the Cherokee said. The mountains remember, and what we've forgotten is still there, waiting. Callaway Creek was covered up because acknowledging what happened there would have been too costly, too disruptive, too challenging to the industrial world view that was reshaping America in 1910. Easier to silence a little girl, pay off some families, pour some concrete, and move on. But moving on isn't. T'ain't the same as resolving. Covering up isn't the same as healing. And sealing something away isn't the same as understanding it. Somewhere under tons of concrete in the Daniel Boone National Forest, there's a cave system that leads to chambers decorated with warnings thousands of years old. There's a door that was opened and never properly closed. There might be something down there that 12 miners found in 1910, something that was hungry enough to take them and might still be hungry for more. I can't prove any of that, but I can prove that the cover-up happened. I can prove that Essie Meber existed, that she had abilities that were documented by multiple credible witnesses, that she gave specific warnings, and that those warnings were ignored with terrible consequences. I can prove that powerful people went to extraordinary lengths to erase this story, and I can prove that they still keeping that area sealed and guarded more than a century later. Ask yourself why. Ask yourself what they're so afraid of. Ask yourself what it means that we're still pretending these things don't happen, that these people don't exist, that these warnings don't matter. Asterisk. Final thoughts. I'm submitting the full documentation from the Callaway Creek incident to the National Archives. I'm publishing a full academic paper with citations and source materials. I'm making sure this story can't be buried again. I expect pushback. I expect people to call this sensationalism or pseudoscience, or irresponsible folklore. I expect the current owners of what used to be the Ashland Coal Company to deny everything and threaten legal action. I don't care. Essie Stamper deserves to be remembered as more than a crazy woman who died in an institution. The 12 miners who disappeared deserve to have their real story told. The 17 people who died in that fire deserve to have the truth spoken. And we deserve to know that there are things in this world we don't fully understand, places we shouldn't carelessly disturb, warnings we should heed even when they come from people we're ain't line to dismiss. An Appalachian child spoke to the dead in 1910. She told us what would happen if we didn't listen. We didn't listen. What happened was covered up, but it wasn't erased. The mountain still remembers, and maybe we should remember too. Asterisk. Postscript. 3 weeks after I started researching this story, I started having dreams. Dreams about caves and darkness and voices calling from deep underground. Dreams about a little girl with white eyes standing at the foot of my bed, trying to tell me something I can't quite hear. I mentioned this to my therapist, who suggested it was just stress and subconscious processing of the disturbing material I'd been researching. She's probably right. But last week, I went back to the restricted area near where Callaway Creek used to be. I didn't go past the fences. I'm not that reckless. But I stood at the boundary and listened. There was a sound. Faint, deep, rhythmic, like breathing from underground. Like something large and old, sleeping, but not quite asleep. Probably just wind moving through old mine shafts. Probably just wind moving through old mine shafts. Probably just my imagination, primed by weeks of research into this story. Probably. But I'm not going back. Here. And I'm not going to dig any deeper into what happened. I've told you everything I found. Everything I know. Some doors, once you've opened them a crack, you don't want to open any further. The dead spoke to Essie Stamper. She spoke for them. And now I've spoken for her. That's enough. That has to be enough. The rest is between the mountain and whatever sleeps beneath it. And I hope to God it keeps sleeping.